So a couple of people have requested I do a response video to this Justicar guy because he's been doing a video series about age of consent laws. Now, I last night got into a little bit of a text argument with Fun with Logic of all people, and even he mentioned this guy, and I said, look, if even this guy's bringing him up, I should probably check him out. I've done that. Last night I watched Justicar's first video in his series on age of consent laws. And, I thought he was pretty muddled and confused about what he's talking about. So let me take this opportunity now to address the issues I had with that video. Because I actually filmed a video on it last night, but I'm not going to bother to upload it. It's unpolished and stupid. I was filming at like 2 in the morning, so I didn't really make any sense myself either. My initial problem with what you're suggesting in your first video is that the only way for what you're trying to advocate would work is if you had some kind of informed consent system. Like you redo the age of consent laws so across the board, kids who are underage who would like to have sex without having to worry about having criminal prosecution befall their partner, they'd have to go to a court, okay, maybe petition for an informed consent sort of ID or whatever, which is already kind of a preposterously stupid thing to have to do in the first fucking place, okay? But say that they get that. Okay, and then there's a 30-day period before you can finally get it. You can have the conversation with family that needs to be had. Like, look, you understand the risks involved. You understand that, yes, adults sometimes take the fuck advantage of one another and certainly would do so to you to get what it is that they want. Do you really want to risk being used by somebody like that? And have the conversations about STDs and safe sex and pregnancy and all that stuff that need to happen. And, after that 30 days, they could still make the ultimate decision of, yes, I would like to do this, or no. So they don't have somebody else having final say over what they get to do with their own body. But, to repeal the legislature that's set in place in 50 states, which varies from state to state, in order to roll this out is just kind of stupid already, is it not? And not only that, but your example of saying that, yes, every now and then there may be an outlier, say maybe a kid who's 8 years old, who has a higher level of maturity and knowledge about subjects like this than anyone else in his age group, deserving some sort of special rights and privileges above anyone else in his age group, is just ridiculous. Because if you want to advocate for a system of fairness, you need to make things fair, because that's not fair. Why should they get the special privileges that no one else around their group of people their own age gets, just because they're in an extreme minority, that maybe there only be a handful of them and we need to include them in this other group? For somebody who said they've studied law, you really don't come off like you have a full grasp on what it is that you're talking about. Okay, I would go full-blown about it, but, there's a lot of shit he says now in his second part of this video series that's even more confusingly stupid. And, apparently, according to what a couple of people have told me, he's in favor of repealing age of consent laws because, well, how do we define rape and what do we define it as? And I'm like, why is this conversation going on? Do people like this literally have to be chained up somewhere and raped by somebody so they understand what the fuck is they're talking about? Okay, it's easy to talk with such, empirical authority that you come off as having about subjects you've probably never personally gone through. But as a survivor and a victim of childhood sexual abuse, okay, I can say myself that I don't like when blowhards like this exploit other people's trauma and say that they have a better understanding of it than people who went through it themselves. I don't appreciate that. So, it just comes off as extremely arrogant. It comes off as extremely know-it-all. And, I can't understand, why these first 2 videos have gotten 200 and 300 thumbs up, because to be really honest, is anyone actually paying attention to what this guy is saying? Really, is anyone really listening to what he's saying, or is he just another one of these smug, manic, the pirate types that has this attitude of, I know better than you. I know better than you. Okay? I went to college, so automatically I know more than you. Which is already a preposterous mindset to have, because you cannot quantify exactly how much anyone knows. So, without further ado, here's my response to Age of Consent Part Deux. I would do a formal video on the first one. It's like 30 minutes long, and I've already said everything I wanted to say about it anyway, so here we go, Part 2 of the series.
So when I made my Age of Consent video, I knew I would have to make future videos to address comments, complaints, questions, some legitimate, some not, and quite simply, a lot of bullshit. In this video I'm going to talk about one particular piece of bullshit, that there exists a so-called cycle of abuse, that sex itself. If someone is sexually abused, it increases their risk to go out and sexually abuse someone else. This is just false.
And yes, I'm looking at the things that you've listed as your backup for this claim. The problem is, for one, you're using what's called Baroness Stern's report, which is a report written by somebody in the United Kingdom, and you're trying to apply it, all right, to things that are wrong about the age of consent legislature in the United States. Okay, that doesn't work. More importantly, you're using the cycle of child sexual abuse report that was written in 2001. If you knew anything about the world of psychology and psychiatry, you would know that these reports change at a moment's notice. All right, you know, from 1 minute to the next, an in-depth study into something can be completely scrapped and replaced by a more recent study that completely found out the previous one was totally fucking wrong. So that doesn't make any sense. Right off the bat, you got a huge problem here. And yes, it is because of the sources you use. Your first source here is Cycle of Child Sexual Abuse, Links Between Being a Victim and Becoming a Perpetrator, written by BRJ Psychiatry, 2001, December 17th.
Here's a study on it. Anyway, it starts off with the background being that this is a widely held belief.
And he doesn't list how old this fucking study is.
You know, there's little empirical support to believe that it's true. And then they do an analysis of some people, and they come up with the following conclusions, which I'll just summarize. Most people who were sexually abused do not sexually abuse anyone else, and most people who do sexually abuse people were not themselves sexually abused.
This is an independent study, though, that was taken nearly 15 years ago almost.
No causation has been found at all. There is an extremely weak correlation for some subset of boys who were abused by older women, and that's it. Beyond that, it just doesn't seem to really be an issue. So when people,
even though there excuse me, that was a very rough hit. But even though there is a correlation between it, and you're just not wanting to admit that, okay, look, as a victim of this, I'm telling you right now, there exists a percentage of people that unfortunately do these sorts of things. They were victimized as a child, it ruined their psychology, and made them more culpable to committing acts like this later on as an adult. And a lot of the time it is people that have never gotten 100% closure on what it was that happened to them. They just go their whole life kind of under the misunderstanding that, you know, well, you know, I got over it, it's not all that bad. You know, they've never had the conversations that needed to be had about things like this. So for you to just arrogantly say that because you say it's a myth, therefore it's a myth, and then you're going to quote some study from almost 15 years ago that, you know, I mean, you're not even going to consider that within those 15 years it may have, you know, been disproven. Okay, I mean, your argument is already in a lot of trouble. Like I said, I don't know why. 200-some thumbs up, really? Like, and I think what the amazing thing is, too, about this is that he's buried his sources under his PayPal, Patreon, and Bitcoinage. So I don't know what that's all about. You know, I make a point just saying personally in my videos to hawk my stupid shit, you know, after my sources. It seems like a little bit more, of having a little bit more integrity.
People start telling you this, and that this is a big problem. It's not a big problem, and it's almost a non-problem. In most cases, it is a non-problem. The cycle just does not perpetuate itself.
So you're saying that, you know, what would you argue then? That because you don't believe the cycle of sexual abuse exists, that the cycle of physical abuse doesn't exist then because you know it? even though there has been extensive study into abusive behavior and things like domestic violence that was spawned by childhood abuses, be it physical or sexual. Just because you say it doesn't happen, that means it automatically doesn't happen. Oh, get out of here. Really?
So that's just false. Now, when they
because you say it.
talk about this, they talk about child sex abuse, and I'm putting that in scare quotes because that's a term. Remember the people who...
You fucking asshole. You one, ruined what was a delicious hit of this grape flavor. Secondly, that's bullshit. It's not a term, it's a thing that actually happens. You minimizing douche. You know, I'm not wanting to go like full ad hominem bullshit, but seriously, you know, that's kind of offensive to a lot of people out there. You know. And, you know, what the hell?
were advocating for this definition, this label to be applied to sex between older adolescents and younger adolescents and adults and children of various ages. They want to refer to the whole of that in certain brackets as child sex abuse. And then in the very next breath, what they'll tell you, like some of the research...
Well, what would you define then? A 35-year-old, let's use the goofy, you know, generally used example. What would you define then? Like a 35-year-old Catholic priest, you know, using the gullible sensibilities of a young boy in order to get into his pants. Would you not call that abuse and manipulation? You know, one of the points that I made in my original video that I shot in a hurry last night for his first thing is that a lot of these laws about age of consent, they're put in place to stop older people from being able to manipulate children. Now, he made a point I can agree with, you know, that we need to kind of change the name of these types of legislations, okay? They don't need to be age of consent more than they need to be laws about manipulation. Because that's what they are. They're trying to keep adults from being able to manipulate the sensibilities of a child. I mean, are you so stupid that you're going to sit there and say that an 8-year-old knows as much about people as somebody in their mid-30s or their early 40s? Somebody that's been alive long enough to know how to take advantage of people? Come on.
Which does says, this gives a lot of hope to social workers and sexual therapists, counselor people, and what the industry that depends on these people thinking of themselves as victims.
Oh, please don't tell me you're one of those people that thinks psychiatry was just solely invented to be an industry driven by pharmaceuticals and it's all one big fucking conspiracy. Okay? I mean, are you one of those goddamn lunatics? I used to be one of those goddamn lunatics myself. But guess what? You sound like a lunatic when you start believing that, oh, it's just one giant conspiracy to enable, I don't know, to enable pharmaceuticals to take advantage of things like sexual abuse. I mean, you can't even describe it because it's just so fucking crazy. So I'm not going to derail my video with that shit, but oh my god.
To show up and give these therapists and social workers their money. Well, if it's not a cycle of violence, then you don't need to worry about that.
So you're saying that somebody that was raped as a child just needs to get over it then? Is that what you're fucking saying?
And with the long-term outcomes, it seems to be, from the research that I've read, and I'll put a link to it below, and then a criticism of it and an attempt to replicate it where they pretty much found more, not entirely the same, but more of the same kind of stuff. That in the long term, whether or not...
Yeah, you're using, one is a fucking 2001 report that they did on it, and then the one that you link in the wiki, you know, is, it says... The Rind et al. Controversy was a debate in the scientific literature, public media, and government legislations in the United States regarding a 1998 peer-reviewed meta-analysis of the self-reported harm caused by childhood sexual abuse. You're talking about something that was that was filed like what? You know, like 18 or 19 fucking years ago. You know, the study's lead author is psychologist Bruce Rind, and it expanded on a 1997 meta-analysis. Okay? You're talking about shit that doesn't even have any relevancy anymore, because if you knew anything about the field of psychology, you know that it's ever-changing, that these reports get expounded upon over time, and you know what? Their findings differ almost from fucking day to day. So you're going to sit here and say that, you know, your empirical certainty is based on something that is almost like... you know, 18 or 19 years old, and you don't even want to accept the fact that it's probably been disproven since that time. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Of course, you know, I guess there's just 200 people out there that couldn't have been fucking bothered to click on these links, you know, because they were too busy throwing money into your PayPal and throwing money into your Patreon, whatever the fuck that is. Everybody suggests, by the way, that I should get one of those, and I'm like, you know, I'm not really sure. I mean, I would feel kind of like a whore, like, send me money for reasons, and everybody's apparently got one of these days, and I don't know if I should do that or not, because it's like e-begging, but in a way not e-begging. It's weird. It's like in an e-begging gray area, so I don't know if I would do that or not.
Sex, which they call child sex abuse, even when it's consensual, when it has the...
Because a 10-year-old can consent to a 40-year-old...
The negative...
Oh, man, you made this idiotic point in your first fucking video, and you decided to miss out intentionally on the entire spectrum of developmental psychology that goes on from the time a kid is like 9 years old all the way up until they're like 16 or 17. All right? And how an adult who's already gone through that can use that to their advantage. So, like I said, even if you wanted to suggest to roll out a system of informed consent where you can petition to say that you have given informed consent and that you're in control of the decisions that you make with your own body, kind of like when a teenager decides they would like to legally emancipate themselves from their parents, I mean, it still wouldn't fucking work because who'd take it seriously? I mean, really, you're talking about these things in absolutes, which just sounds absolutely stupid.
Outcomes that tends to be the cases where it's not actually consensual, like the minor in question is actively resisting it, is not agreeing to it, I don't want this, don't do this, please stop, that kind of thing.
So only if it's a violent rape does it constitute as an actual rape. And what made you the reigning authority on who defines what rape is?
You get negative outcomes in the long term.
You know, you ask in your first video on this, like, you know, you ask in your first video, like, well, what should we define rape as? And then here you are doing it again, and I'm like, who the fuck are you? Okay, so only if a rape is violent, and only if they resist it does it constitute as a rape. So are you going to be one of these people who then argue if, you know, they used alcohol to lull their sensibilities, or they got roofied, then it's not rape? Okay, because it wasn't physically violent? Good Lord.
And for people who have these various experiences and refer to them as consensual, or that they assented to them or whatever, you don't get a parade of horribles following in the train. Now, the Congress condemned this report. It's horrible, the U.S. Congress, that is. It's oh my God, how could you say that?
Says the guy who's trying to apply a report that was written in the UK to U.S. law, so, yeah.
Clearly, it's just necessarily the case that it has to be true. And so other psychologists decided to see if they could replicate some of the findings, and indeed they did replicate some of the findings. And then they couched their terms by saying, so people should not go around claiming that it's necessarily true that child sex abuse, which they still call it,
yeah, in 1998,
has all these down the road consequences. And then they say this gives a lot of hope to sex counselors and social workers, the whole litany of the help gurus, who very often invent problems for you and then offer you a solution. And after a while,
for God's sake, yeah, you really are one of these lunatics who seem to think that the entire industry of psychology, therapy, and psychiatry is just a big conspiracy to make money. You're a fucking lunatic.
Let's go.
It's not a conspiracy. You know, there are some people out there that like to do shit like that. There's always going to be those kind of people. But you know what? I've gone to therapists for a lot of the things that have happened to me in my life. I've gone to psychologists for a lot of the things that happened to me in my life. You know, it may sound unrelated, but I'm a former alcoholic. I'm a former fucking drug addict. I was sexually assaulted as a child. I grew up in an extremely dysfunctional household and an extremely fucked up family, okay? You know, even though my grandparents were like financially hooked the fuck up, they still try to parent me with their old fucking, you know, 1940s mentality, which in today's world we call child abuse, whilst I had to watch my parents grow up to be, you know, just losers. You know, yeah, I love my fucking parents. They're my mom and dad, but it didn't change the fact that my dad was an alcoholic and my mom was fucking her life up with her own problems, okay? So you're going to sit here and say that people who've gone through those things are just being misled by this conspiratorial system that just wants to make money off their problems when they go to therapy, even though that therapy has been completely beneficial to them. You know, yeah, it's just because of a conspiracy that I was able to work out my problems, where I'm not drinking my sorrows away, where I'm not popping oxys to make my fucking sorrows go away, you know, where I'm not becoming completely self-destructive. Sometimes it takes a helping hand. So I take a little offense, you know, and I'm sure a lot of other people would as well, to the suggestion that we all wasted our fucking time because we're not on your level and don't just get it. You know, if like you're some kind of elaborate troll, you may want to admit this in the future, because it's impossible to take you seriously when you say shit like that. And you want to quote studies from like 19 fucking years ago almost.
Well, there must be something to it. So many people believe it. So those are a couple of things.
Oh yeah, there must be something to it, because some asshole suggested that, you know, the entire institution of psychology and psychiatry and even independent therapy is all just a giant conspiracy driven by pharmaceuticals. I read into this shit, and it's just bullshit. You know, there's a big thing in LA that's run by the Church of Scientology, and it's, you know, it's like the horrors of modern psychology. It's like a haunted house about how draconian, you know, the asylums of times past used to be. And it's so fucking preposterous, because when you watch the video they show in it, you know, they're trying to compare how psychology is, you know, done in today's world, and compare it to that shit. Even though half of these places were all shut the fuck down in the 80s because of massive human rights and ethics violations and fucking violations of just people's, you know, like their civil fucking rights all across the board. Yeah, shut up. Good God. I mean, if this is the kind of caliber of people that are coming the fuck out of college these days, then this world is truly over. You go to college to completely eradicate anything you could have learned about life before you went in. And that's all I see. I mean, this guy, in his first video I watched from him, he claimed to have had, he said he has some kind of education in the field of law. I think he was like a criminal, he wanted to pursue like a criminal, either a criminal justice degree or criminal prosecution degree, something like that. Something along those lines. I'm not going to quote 100% because I can't remember. But he's got a background in something like that. And I'm like, how the fuck can you have a background in something like that and advocate stupidity on this big of a scale? If you know how the system works, and I'm assuming that you do because you went to school to learn how it works, then why are you going to suggest shit that's going to break it even more than it's already broken? You of all people know it works because at its core, it doesn't work. And it just insists that it does, to the point to where we just have to deal with its inefficiencies. So
things that people parade around, the sexual violence part, and that it has all these negative outcomes in the long run. They just really don't seem to pan out in reality.
Oh yeah, people that have gone through massive amounts of childhood sexual abuse. Let's just use the extreme cases. They turn out fine. You know, they get raped like 10 times as a child. They get they get violated horrendously. Oh yeah, none of those people turn out fucked up. Oh, you know, I certainly never turned out fucked up. No, I totally didn't become a fucking self-destructive piece of shit for a long time in my life, you know, because of that. No, it was only because I wanted to fuck up my own life. You're an ass. You're an ass.
Very commonly held myth, but a myth nevertheless. Now, of course, there's some risk, and for some people there will undoubtedly be bad outcomes, but the fact that it happens to some people doesn't mean that it miracles itself into some necessary condition or some very high proportion.
Why? Because you say it. Okay, like, back any of this shit up and use a study that wasn't written like 19 fucking years ago.
Or some extreme problem. It just isn't the case. And if you take any of the other ills that people want to talk about, teen pregnancy, STDs, rape, go to Europe, don't actually go to Europe, just go look at the statistics, and plot on a graph all the...
because you're going to say that by comparing the statistics of these issues between Europe and the United States, now that they're now trivial. Good Lord.
countries, the ones that we think of as Western countries, plot them, put on a graph, plot on one axis the age of consent, so 13 for Spain and then 14 all the way up to whatever it is, and then plot whatever the metric is you're interested in. Teen pregnancy, lower age of consent is correlated with lower rates of teen pregnancy.
No, it's not just because of that. It's also because in Europe they have a lot more of a progressive educational system, and they actually do what they can to educate their kids better about these issues than we do. Okay, now you're going to get into a completely different spectrum of issues. Europe does have a much better educational system than the United States because, in a way, its education system it sort of give a fuck about how their kids turn the fuck out. I wouldn't say 100% across the board, but it's certainly better than the idiotic public education system that we have in this country that can't even be taken seriously by any of its fucking pupils. So that is more of why that is, as opposed to it's only because of a lower age of consent. They lower the age of consent because they expect their kids to know better. In this country, our system kind of expects our kids to turn out like fucking idiots, and it has done a good job at, unfortunately, ensuring that for years.
STDs.
This video kind of proves it.
Lower age of consent is correlated with lower rates of STD transmission. Rape. Societies that have lower age of consent laws have lower rates of rape. All other things being equal, that is to say, in some cultures that's not true.
Yeah, and that only works because you're lowering the age of consent. So what's legally defined as rape, okay? So that doesn't make your statistic work. Okay.
We're talking about the West, different places.
Well, they legally define it as this, therefore the statistic is then automatically by default lower. Therefore, my argument is right. No, it's not. It's still wrong. This guy is absolutely dead set on thinking that this is, that he's right when he's not. You can't just vet the statistic, based on what makes it work for your argument to drive whatever narrative that you're trying to drive here.
They have different factors that aren't true here, and they get different outcomes for different reasons, and that's just not relevant here.
Secondly, you're talking about Europe compared to the United States, and Europe has an entirely different system than we do, so you couldn't even compare the two if you wanted. You're just fucking throwing things out there to justify your viewpoint, which is stupid.
So when you have a society that's generally free, and you try to repress people, you find out what most people already know. Prohibition, oppression, and repression don't work. If you want to get people to change,
I will agree with that in a sense that prohibition does not work whatsoever. But if you're gonna, and I don't know if he's gonna do this, but if he's gonna compare it to alcohol and drug prohibition, then holy fucking shit, you're missing the point. These are laws set up to keep people from manipulating other people's sensibilities. Like, for example, we have laws against drunk driving to keep people from inebriating their own sensibilities, having 20 fucking margaritas and 20 shots of tequila and going out and driving and fucking wiping out a minivan full of kids, okay? Our laws are designed to keep other people from hurting other people, So, would you argue that we would be in a safer country if we abolished all of our laws on drunk driving? Okay, if you abolished all of the laws that are trying to protect women against domestic violence, then the statistic for domestic violence would go down because you vetted all the laws against it. All right, so therefore you've kind of manipulated your own statistic because it's no longer defined as domestic violence because it's not a crime anymore. You can't just say that something is no longer a crime in the eyes of the law and then think that it's no longer a bad thing. If you're talking about some fucking 40-year-old manipulating a 13-year-old and doing what they can to lull them into having sex with them, and you're so stupid you don't think that's rape because they kind of fucked with the kid's head, you're an idiot. Like I said, I didn't want to turn this into a ranty ad hominem-filled pile of shit, but god damn. Is this guy really listening to anything that he's saying? Are any of the 224 people that have said, yes, I agree with this, actually listening to anything that this guy is saying? For a person who studied law, you really don't seem to understand much about why laws exist, do you? You know, you're probably under the impression that, yes, all laws, you know, I'm not going to say that I'm under the impression that all laws are set up to protect the citizen. You know, a lot of the times they are set up to protect the system that creates them. And they don't have the intention of giving a fuck about the public. They're not intended to protect the public. Sometimes laws are designed to protect only the system that creates them. But when you talk about things like age of consent, these are laws that are designed, like I said, to keep people from manipulating younger people. Because younger people, especially in this country, are fucking stupid.
Conduct, particularly on issues that people find important, you have to convince them, you have to persuade them, you have to give them the freedom to make decisions that you don't like, and provide them with the sufficient education to be able to intelligently make those decisions. And I'll just point out that in the European countries, the lower ages of consent, those children,
which is based on education, and you've missed that entirely, and you really don't seem to have done a lot of research into this.
And those lower aged people are making more intelligent decisions than in the countries that have the more restrictive laws on the higher age of consent laws. So
but the problem is, it's not just an issue of law, and I don't get how the fuck you don't see this. It's an issue of education. These kids are taught from a younger age about issues like this, and they're, you know, expected to make wiser decisions. In this country, like I say one more time, we expect less of our kids. And then we wonder why the education system doesn't work. Well, because we kind of expect them to turn out stupid. We shouldn't expect that of them. We should bust their asses like 30 times harder in school than we do right now. You would watch the statistical equation that you're talking about here start to balance itself out with the examples you provided in Europe. If you have better education on these topics and you do so in a manner where kids can take it the fuck seriously and actually want to try to better themselves and become more responsible people, then the statistics of all these social ills go the fuck down. It's not just law. And I mean, you know, the thing I'm noticing about this video, and it's probably going to be in the third one, if I ever do a response to it, it'll probably be in the third response video, or this third video that you've done on this topic. You'll probably insist that, you know, it's something else and then miss another complete fucking spectrum of something. In your first video, you missed out on the complete spectrum of the psychological development that people go through during their teenage years and how adults can take advantage of it if they choose to, so they can make it seem like the person gave consent to something they weren't even sure about, and yet that's okay. You know, in this video, you're missing out on the entire spectrum of why these statistical values from the United States compared to those in Europe differ, and you think that it's only about law. It's not only about law.
Whatever the particular example from the parade of horribles you want to pull out, it's pretty much going to be the case that if you have a lower age of consent, it seems to be the case that you have found a society where you're going to have less of that being a problem.
Seems to be, but it hasn't been 100% fucking proven. But of course, like I said, to suit your narrative, you're not going to point that out.
Not a lot to be said about this. It's no great mystery. Just look back through history and you can see that prohibition, using the power of the criminal statute to get people to change their conduct on things that are important to people, sex, food, religion, drugs, recreation, that kind of stuff, don't have the outcomes that you want, notwithstanding the fact that you will...
And then that's under the presumption that you could ever create a law a criminal wouldn't break.
Be assured.
Okay, so you're just saying we need to create a law that's unbreakable. No, you can't do that. It's impossible. Duh, prohibition didn't work. You know, especially considering when people realized that they could create a massive industry off shit like alcohol and cigarettes. Alright? And what do you think the reason why they're going to repeal prohibition on marijuana is? Because they realize that there's a fucking industry in that. To be honest, I don't know why the hell they never did that in the first place. You know, we wouldn't have like huge economic deficits in a lot of industries in this country if people could literally independently start their own weed growing business, because anybody can fucking do it. You know, the government wants to be able to put its rubber stamp of approval on shit. So yeah, a prohibition doesn't work, but you're not talking about prohibition in the sense that, with this particular context, that it's talked about with things like, you know, like it was for booze and cigarettes and like it is still a little bit for weed. Okay? You're talking about prohibiting people's behavior. And, I mean, should we repeal any law, then, that prohibits people from behaving as they choose? I mean, you can't be so stupid. Do you think a system that exists only to allow people to act solely on their own judgments would work? Good God. I rather the inefficiencies of the current system we have in place than the gross deficiencies of the fucking cannibal-filled wasteland Psychoville that shit would be. The mob rule, you know.
Word by the prohibitionists that it's necessarily true that doing this will in fact solve the alleged to exist problem. But you don't even have to...
For God's sake, alleged to exist. So now what are you going to imply now? That childhood sex abuse just doesn't exist? Well, it's a myth. Nobody's ever proven it. Yeah, I mean, that's as preposterous as fucking saying, well, can we prove anyone's ever been raped? Oh, I mean, that person was raped. It was violent. Come on. You gotta do better than this.
Look through history. You can look at the world today. As I mentioned in the previous video, I have seen, I don't know how many of these execution videos that ISIS has done, to include the ones they do for PR purposes, and then the ones that are just filmed by the people on the field as they're corralling people and killing them.
Yeah, but is that happening all over the fucking world like it used to? No. This is a particular sect of psychotic fucking religious extremists who claim that they're Muslims, and yet they murder Muslims all the fucking time, who hijacked a religious ideology so they could use it to their advantage to justify all the sick shit that they do. How does what ISIS does with the executions they do represent the rest of the fucking world? Because as far as I know, I think, you know, the entire fucking world right now wants these assholes as dead can fucking be. Come on, you fucking idiot. You know, I can't tell you how screwed up the world is. I saw a beheading video. I mean, you know, what happens in the third world is really serious, guys. Yeah, it happens in the third world. Does it represent what happens in the rest of the fucking world? You're gonna sit there and say what a lot of the drug cartels near the Mexican-American border, what the fuck they do? You know, is that representative of, you know, is that an allegory for how we do justice in this country?
And I've yet to find one. I haven't specifically looked for it, but I've yet to find one where, when down on their knees, the people convert to that particular form of Islam. So.
Oh, for God's sake, you fucking moron! Even if they did, you really think they'd keep the motherfucker alive? No, they'd kill him anyway. The ISIS does not give a shit about the religion, you know, that it's using to justify what it's doing. And now, I don't want anybody who is watching this that's like a Muslim or anything to take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to put down what it is that you believe or you as a person, so don't take it the wrong way. You know, but seriously, these motherfuckers aren't Muslims. Okay? They're not. They don't even give a shit about Muslims. Like I said, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to be an insulting asshole because this isn't my viewpoint. But ISIS looks at Muslims like dirty, fucking, grotesque, like, flea-infested peasants. And, you know, it's because of that bigotry and that we're just so arrogant we feel that we deserve to be on top because we've never fucking been anything before. We should kill all the fucking rest of you. You know, that they've given themselves the rights to do that. So even if somebody who's in one of these beheading videos got down on their knees and they swore on a Quran, you know, that they're now a Muslim, that they reject whatever faith they were, or if they were an atheist, actually have gained faith and found, you know, faith in this religion, you really think that they would actually stop the execution? No, they motherfucking wouldn't. They'd still go on with it. They're just using a religion as a front to justify their psychotic fucking behavior. They're extremists. They don't actually believe in this shit. They don't give a fuck about it. It's given them something that they can use as propaganda. The Christians did this during the Crusades. They used the fucking Christian religion as propaganda to justify fucking killing people who didn't believe in Christianity, or torturing them into fucking repenting for being sinners for not believing it. This is just a fucked up thing that human beings do. So to say that it represents, these one-offs represent ultimately what civilization has become is fucking stupid. Yeah, it's a fucked up thing that human beings do. And it's a fucked up thing that human beings have done all throughout the fucking ages. And now, in previous, you know, ages, yes, it did help kind of shape the world into the weird, sort of chaotic melting pot of civilization, society, and culture that it is, but are we still ultimately, and I'm saying this kind of like, you know, in the majority of the first world at least, is the majority of civilized society going to the gallows every weekend to watch the executions? No, for God's sake. People bitch enough about the fucking death penalties that we have that are a lot quicker than somebody getting their head chopped off with a rusty fucking, you know, paint scraper blade on a guillotine, for fuck's sake. Alright? So we live in a far more progressive society, for the most part, than we ever have before. So to compare the atrocities that ISIS pulls to and good Lord, you're an idiot. And to say that if somebody converted to Islam, they'd give a fuck, is just ridiculous. So that goes to show me how little you really know about any of these fucking issues. They wouldn't give a shit. They'd still kill them anyway.
Religion's very important to people, and these Muslims are killing all the wrong kind of Muslims and Christians, and these people aren't having, I guess, what you could call execution bed conversions. Yes.
You are one fucking deluded dork. I was going to call you a dick, but dork came out. I mean, do you really, like I said, do you really think, for one, that they would give a shit? And do you also think that anybody would do that? Really?
Sweet.
They would sell who they are out as a human being just to get out of a bad situation? If these fuckers were going to cut off my fucking head, I'd take it. Alright? I'm not going to sit there and be a fucking pants-winning, panty-waist pussy and sell out my fucking beliefs so somebody can not chop off my fucking head. Alright? You know, I don't want to turn this into a stupid fucking bunch of bullshit here, but if that were to hypothetically happen to me, and I died, let's say the afterlife is real, I know where the fuck I'm going. I'm doing at least 10 years before I get any sort of redemption. Maybe 10 to 15 for the stupid shit that I've done in my fucking life in hell. Okay? Where do you fucking think assholes like that would go? I would do my time well with people like that. Nobody who's a sensible person who actually believes in the ideals they've held most of their life is actually gonna fucking sit there and sell themselves out like that. You're an idiot. I'm sorry. I know that has nothing to do with this video, but also to bring it up in the first place really has nothing to do with what you're talking about anyway. What the fuck does ISIS have to do with age of consent?
They're given. They could convert and potentially save their lives, or they could refuse to convert and definitely die. And they are choosing to intentionally refuse to convert.
Because they don't want to sell out who they are as a person for their own petty shit, greedy fucking life. Alright, if saving their life means killing the lives of other people, are they really going to fucking consciously do that? I mean, you're talking about a lot of these people that are like, they think they've killed a couple of Americans. Let's say they capture, like a group of American soldiers, okay, and they tell the guy, here's the ultimatum. We'll release your buddies if you let us kill you. You really think the guy's going to sit there and let his friends fucking get killed? Okay, there is the question of uncertainty. How is he really going to know they're not going to do it anyway? But let's just grant this the hypothetical. They're not really going to fucking do it. Alright? You're putting this into the context of, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, yes, I would let him chop my fucking head off with a rusty butter knife to spare the lives of other people. Other people whose fucking lives do not deserve to be ended, so I can spare my own shitty, greedy, petty, motherfucking dumbass existence. The majority, the overwhelming majority of people in this world would do that. A lot of people in this world would do that willingly, because other people shouldn't have to die for somebody else's own greed. I would rather somebody take my own life, even if it's violently, so that, other people don't have to die, and then I'd have to be looked at as a fucking coward for the rest of my own life because I saved my own petty, shitty fucking existence. Shut up. You're a fucking idiot, seriously.
You start fucking with the most basic aspects of humanity. You get opposite outcomes from what you want if you're repressive about it. You have to persuade people that they're wrong. You have to persuade people to make better decisions.
Oh, for fuck's sake, you're talking about a group of terrorists that stick people's heads on fucking pikes for fun. How are you going to rationalize with these idiots?
Now,
these are motherfuckers that indiscriminately kill men, women, children, elderly, mentally disadvantaged, physically disadvantaged, and handicapped people. You're going to sit there and try to have a roundtable discussion with these guys? You are a fucking moron. You're probably a pacifist, too.
Comes to things like
you know, you can call me a warmongering asshole because I'm not a pacifist, whatever. Okay, you know, I'm not the person who would sit around and try to reason with, like, Adolf Hitler and say, oh, well, if only a couple of people had a conversation with Hitler, he probably wouldn't have killed all them Jews. Yeah, I think he probably would have fucking killed all them fucking Jews. Just like I think that even if you had a conversation with these ISIS cunts, they'd still kill a whole lot of fucking Christians and Muslims. You stupid fuck.
Murder and rape and whatnot. Those aren't times where you want to sit around and just persuade people. You want to try to persuade people and have the force of criminal law, so that way when they do commit these acts, we can put them in small cages and keep them there for long periods of time. Because,
or if they're like some of these people, you could just fucking kill them because they're goddamn useless wastes of fucking space. Clean up the gene pool. You know, to be honest, I think the world could do with a few less of these fucking psychopaths in it, you know? That's just me. You know? I mean, it's not like you're probably one of those people that believes that there is indeed a genetic component to violent behavior. You know, you're probably going to quote me a study from the 1940s or something that would suggest, oh, see, it was proven here in 1945, you know, that there is no correlation between, you know, a genetic predisposition to violent behavior from parent to child. You know, fuck you. Or from environment to society.
They've proven they're not people that need to be dealt with seriously. I mean, they need to be dealt with seriously by putting them in cages, but they don't have to be taken seriously. Their opinion just doesn't count.
So what are we going to do? Sweep the fucking problem under the rug? You know, there's times where, if ever I'm in a conversation that gets to this point, I've always used this example. You know, so what you're doing is you're going to sweep all the problems under the rug and pretend they're not there. Okay, apply that to, like, your own life, okay? Say you've got, like, a lot of trash in your house, and you just sweep it under your fucking rug, okay? You know, yeah, nobody can fucking see it, alright? And your house smells kind of weird because you've just swept all your trash under the rug. And you keep doing this. Eventually, you're going to have this nice-looking rug on top of a huge pile of fucking stupid shit. And it's going to be an awful goddamn grotesque fucking mess, and somebody's finally going to have to put their foot down and clean it the fuck up. Okay, the TV show Hoarders is a perfect example of this. Alright, it starts out with something really fucking small, and then just blossoms into this unbelievable goddamn, like, fucking landfill of fail. And that's exactly what you're doing with these societal fucking problems here. You can't just sweep them under the rug and throw them all in prison and then say, well, see, now they're all in cages and they're filed away and we don't have to look at it you know, we don't have to deal with it any further than that. Yeah, we goddamn do. And as a species and a fucking civilization, that we have a responsibility to. Okay? You know, we have things like the death penalty for a fucking reason. We can't just continue to give society the impression that it's okay to kill, it's okay to murder. I mean, the worst thing that'll happen to you is you sit in a concrete fucking room with an iron door. You can't be that relaxed about it, because then your crime statistics go through the roof when people cannot take the system that prosecutes crime seriously anymore. And I mean, you were apparently you were some kind of criminal justice major. What the fucking fuck?
So, long and short of that, persuade.
Of course, I don't know what I'm talking about because, you know, I know, well, you weren't a criminal justice major, so that means I have the right to say that you don't have the right to say anything you're saying because I know better. I'm right because I know it. Good Lord.
People don't try to ram it down their throats. Here's an example from history that has never, ever happened and will never, ever, ever happen. No person has ever died of starvation standing in a room full of food that they don't own. No one is going to stand there and say, well, you know...
and I don't think that's a situation that's ever fucking happened either. You know, unless, you know, maybe they put somebody in a fucking room of food they made them buy and then put a gun to their head and said, if you eat any of this, I'll blow your fucking head off.
I'm starving, I need to eat, but there's this law that says stealing is wrong. To hell with that law, I'm going to eat and I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with in the future after I've assured my own survival.
Well, no shit. People will break laws in order to fucking survive. Alright? You know, people have committed murder in order to survive, okay? They've broken the laws that are set up against killing people. in order to save their own life if they're being, like, violently attacked or their life is in ultimate danger because of somebody else's violent fucking behavior. No, duh. No fucking shit.
The more basic to humanity something is, the less the less able you are to control it by prohibition. The less able you are to control it by repressive tactics. The less able you are to control it by trying to oppress people and dispossess them of their natural rights. And it's worth remembering.
So you're saying that people have a natural right to fuck 8-year-olds? Is that what your overlying point is here? Yeah, right.
That people who aren't adults, that is to say minors, are themselves humans. There are some good reasons to categorically dispossess some children of all of their, not all of their rights, a good portion of their rights, because they don't have the mental firepower required to understand what they are and to make...
And that's why they put these things in fucking place. But to say that, you know, that they have a natural right to be allowed to be taken advantage of by people older than them is a fucking idiotic statement.
Make use of them. They can't make intelligent decisions. Makes perfect sense. The older people get, the less force that argument has. The problem, as I've mentioned in many videos, is the infantilization of the species. This want to keep people as thought of as infants from the time they're born until they reach some magic age, and then it's like I think I mentioned in the previous videos, it's going to go like birth, adolescence, death before these people are done with it. They're just trying to do away with a whole bunch of important steps in the progress of a human's life, and they will sit here and talk about, well, if you let 12-year-olds have sex, or if you let 13-year-olds have sex, particularly with older people, because an age gap is tremendously important for reasons that have never, ever been explained to me. If you let that happen, then this entire cavalcade of horrible, horrible outcomes will obtain.
But that's all propaganda and scare tactics. I mean, for God's sake, the majority of our fucking justice system is based on Greco-Roman bullshit from like fucking centuries ago. Okay, and that's just all religious rule. I don't really think it's even fair either, the way we set this whole fucking system up. But, that's all the fucking premarital bullshit and all purity fucking religious-based bullshit. And that's their justification for that kind of crap, for that infantilization. Now that they've come up with a bunch of legal jargon, they're going to label it as that. But at its core, that's where the fuck it came from, because it's all religious shit. And that in and of itself isn't 100% fair, but are you going to argue that, the system will ever be any different? Because it fucking won't. It won't. It enjoys feeling like it has a divine, God-given duty to, pursue justice and determine the fates of other fucking people. Which is kind of, just completely power-tripping. I mean, it's, out of control these days.
Notwithstanding the fact that, in the West at least, that doesn't seem to be true. And also one guy mentioned, just as an aside here, that 12-year-old, people that are 12, 13, 14, whatever, they can't take care of themselves, let alone another human. And then a couple sentences later says, now back in the day, they were able to do this, but that was because it was important for survival. We haven't evolved.
So is that an invalid argument? Because I'll tell you this, yeah, back in the day, back in my granddad's day, you had to know how the fuck to survive. He grew up during the Great fucking Depression. He grew up during World War II. He served in the fucking Korean War as a goddamn young adult. And those were some goddamn hard years for this country. Okay, we live in a society right now that's so fucking relaxed that most fucking amenities that you really need to get in touch with people, to, to know what's really going on in the world and shit. You don't have to depend on the newspaper anymore. You don't have to wait until the 5 o'clock news comes on. You've got everything you need in a piece of goddamn plastic so fucking thin that you can fit it in your pocket. You've got everything in the world at your fucking fingertips here. Okay? And because of that lax of our society, because of all that shit, yes, people have obviously become a lot more, a lot less responsible than they've needed to be, because that required survival instinct isn't exactly the same anymore. But in a way, we're kind of doing a disservice to society by not trying to, at least, I wouldn't say enforce it, but try to encourage it. You know, make sure kids feel that they should have a duty to get a job and straighten the fuck out of their lives so they don't fucking end up becoming the majority of fucking vagrant fucking losers before they're even in their 20s that you see floating all over this country. I think life is ultimately all the fuck about partying and taking drugs and fucking drinking and all this other nonsense. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm one of these fucking blowhards who says, oh, don't ever try to experiment, or, you know, don't ever try to, don't ever go through the fucking same shit that everyone else in their life fucking goes through. Because, you know, I am a former alcoholic and a former fucking drug addict, okay? You know, and my teenage years were a lot goddamn worse than I'm even willing to fucking describe here than you'd probably imagine. But I'll say this, you know, without that encouragement, without the, without somebody pushing them to want to do better, I mean, is it not just a fucking cabal of stupidity? You know, you have a responsibility as a society to try to make the citizens of your society, the members of your society, want to do better for themselves. And, you know, to deny them that is just ridiculous.
Since then, we're not fundamentally different.
I mean, we may live in a pretty advanced society these days, but the need for that is no goddamn different than it was back during the times of absolute disastrous and catastrophic economic recession. You know, I mean, my grandpa, he told me all the time about the stuff that he had to do when he was younger. You know, I mean, he was like 11 and 12 years old, having to go find work. Nobody in this fucking country anymore tries to find work at 11 or 12. I don't even think that you can actually ever get a formal job that young in this country. I think the youngest that you can get a job is like 15 in most states, maybe 14 in most states, and you actually have to get a waiver that says that you have to get a young workers like waiver or something in a lot of states to even do it anymore. You know, but back in those days, you know, it was a lot different. And that gave people an enhanced sense of responsibility for good fucking reason. They needed to. I mean, for God's sake, right after that shit, we went into a multinational fucking war, for God's sake. You know, we were up against, you know, the Germans, and we were up against the Japanese. You know, people were having to watch their sons, and in some cases their daughters too, you know, get sent overseas that may never get the fuck back again, and we actually had to do everything we could to help finance this gigantic motherfucking effort. You know? So, and now we just do the same exact thing by levying the fuck out of taxes and then ending up in a goddamn bigger economic deficit than this country has ever seen before. But, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, the difference in the day and age that we live in now from then, it doesn't matter. People still, they would still do better with the same level of responsibility, the same level of independence. Okay? So then your argument might hold some fucking water, but we don't goddamn live in a world where people want to be that way anymore. They don't want to work that hard to get what it is that they want, the majority of them at least. You know, it's almost a minority of people that want to bust their ass that hard anymore. So you just can't mandate people's behavior and then think that, you know, you're basically contradicting yourself, because you're saying that mandating people's behavior doesn't work, but you're saying that, well, if we did, you know, then they'd be more responsible, and your whole thing is like falling the fuck apart here. And it's almost hard for me to respond to because it's so fucking confusing.
Than the human species was 200 years ago, or 300 years ago. 12, 13, 14-year-olds are not less capable of reasoning than they were centuries ago, and indeed they're quite a bit more sophisticated now.
Are you kidding? So you're saying that if you fucking transplanted, let's say you just hypothetically invented a time machine and then brought somebody who's a total fucking pederast fucking manipulative ass. No, that's a bad example. Okay, let's say you just brought somebody, okay, anybody from today's day and age back 400 or 500 years ago, back to like the Middle Ages, and they wouldn't be able to manipulate the sensibilities of people back then. You're saying that with the knowledge people have now, they couldn't use it to their advantage back in like 500 years ago? Back when people were so goddamn stupid they didn't think the fucking Earth went around the sun? They thought the Earth was actually flat in the center of the universe? You goddamn stupid.
Than they were centuries ago.
Yeah, back when they fucking killed people for not believing in God. Yeah, people were really rational in them days.
And also on the biological front, an evolutionary process that tries to make a species that is, one, concerned about its offspring and invests a lot of resources into its offspring, two, is physically able to produce offspring, but three, is mentally incapable of appreciating how to do that, is a species that will go immediately extinct. It will be outcompeted by...
So, oh yeah, bullshit, because we've been around for 250 fucking thousand years or so. Okay, roughly humans have been around 250,000 plus years. Okay, so that's bullshit. That's absolutely bullshit, because we're still fucking here. Okay, and we have a sophisticated enough level of technology and science and medicine and understanding of what it is that we do as a biological organism to kind of prevent our extinction. For God's sakes, we're at such an advanced point in our fucking technology that we're going to try to colonize shit like Mars soon. And it's actually independent research ventures doing this too. So yeah, we're going to ultimately go extinct because we prohibit people from fucking children. My God.
Plants. It is not a species that can survive. It would have to develop a different survival strategy.
Dude, that's all fucking human beings do is survive, okay? I mean, all we are at our core is a fucking DNA molecule that went through billions of years of evolution. Okay, it started probably just off as nothing more than just a few independent DNA molecules and coalescing elements, and they kept doing whatever the hell it could through evolution to end up surviving in the environments that this universe and this planet and everything became as time has progressed. You know, I mean, for fuck's sake, there's a person on this website who refers it as a gladiator war of biology, and that's exactly what the fuck it is. You know, well, we're the prevalent species on this fucking planet because we have a biology that just kicked enough ass at this evolution thing to get to where the fuck it is now. I mean, we have an advanced psychology because we needed our DNA and our biology and evolution were developed an advanced enough psychology to model the environment we live in so we can get around it better. Instead of being a bunch of fucking retarded monkeys sitting the fuck around eating our shit and throwing it everywhere and jacking off all day and beating the fuck out of each other like any of the apes you see in the fucking zoo do. For God's sake. You're going to sit there and look at a chimpanzee and say, wow, that's really where we came from? No, not really. That's an evolutionary dead end. We're something completely fucking different. And it's just through millions of years of just biological gladiator fucking war on a scale so small you need a fucking microscope to even see it.
Like, for example, if it has high birth rates, like puppies and cats and rabbits, to compensate for how many of them are going to die and not make it into adulthood to be able to reproduce. They overcome the death attrition rate by having, litters of puppies and kittens and
Well,
bunny.
how does that apply to humans? Do fucking puppies and kittens have fucking wars with one another? Do puppies and kittens commit jihad on one another? Come on.
And whatever. Or like reptiles who don't have any interest in their young.
I mean, for God's sake, where has it ever been observed anywhere in the world that an animal species has literally initiated war with another one? Okay, where it's a conscientious effort to fucking exterminate arbitrarily another species, okay? In the animal kingdom, that's never fucking happened. Okay, the attrition rate that happens in the wild is just because of predation and stuff, like predatory behavior. So that has almost nothing to do with what it is that we do as fucking human beings. For maybe a couple of thousand years during our evolution when we were just starting to become humans from the Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals and all that other shit, I would say that, yes, that would be a valid argument. But you're talking about hundreds of thousands of fucking years ago. All right, the majority of the attrition rate for human beings that occurs is through shit like war and human beings consciously making the decision to kill one another. We are the only species on this planet that, not for reasons of survival, that not for reasons of necessity, choose to kill members of our own fucking species. Okay? We make a decision to say, they're fucking worthless, so therefore they gotta die in this world. Okay? You know, the husband who catches his wife fucking another man in bed makes the conscious goddamn decision to blow his fucking head off. Alright? And then blow his wife's fucking head off. And either sit around and wait for the cops and blow his own fucking head off. Because we have enough of an advanced psychology where it's just one straw getting pulled after the fucking other. And finally, when the final straw goes, he fucking goes and doesn't give a shit anymore. Where do you see that happening in animals? You know, animals will viciously attack anything in their path if they're horrendously abused by humans that made the conscious goddamn decision to horrendously fucking abuse them. So your argument doesn't make any fucking it doesn't make an excuse for this bullshit. It doesn't make any sense.
Don't care for them at all. They just produce tons of them. So that way some of them will just, you know, law of large numbers, make it into the next generation. But we're not those kinds of species. We have kids, typically one at a time, sometimes two or three, and other oddities, but generally one kid at a time, to which we devote a tremendous amount of our resources. It would be nonsensical to have, it is not possible to believe, if you're a sensible person, that evolution would have designed a creature physically able to have children that is simultaneously heavily invested in caring for that children, but mentally retarded, that the species can't do it. It would die out. So clearly this argument has no force.
But who the fuck is making that argument realistically? Okay, but we live as members of a species that make the conscious effort a lot of the time to not take care of its own. Okay, I mean, there are deadbeat motherfuckers all over the place, you know. And then there's also the contingency of people that willingly birth children into this world to try to keep somebody in their life as a fucking romantic interest. That they bring a human consciousness into fucking existence to use as a bargaining chip. Alright? You know, we have a fucked psychology because of evolution. It developed a psychology for us advanced enough to be an accurate environment modeler so that we could survive in this fucking environment for the very reason you just listed. And over the fucking last few fucking centuries and the last few ages, this is the shit that we've consciously decided to choose to do with it. To use it at. You know, how to use it. So, you know, you're really comparing apples and oranges, and it's just stupid. It doesn't work. Because what does any of this fucking shit have to do with age of consent? Are you ultimately saying that we have a natural right to be allowed to fuck 5-year-olds? You know, I really hate to use the extreme argument, okay? But if you're saying that it's a natural, you know, thing that, you know, well, thousands of years ago we used to in the wild, you know, 400 years ago it was okay to fuck 12-year-olds. I mean, you know, 400 years ago we didn't know shit about human psychology. We didn't know what the fuck these things would do to people. In my grandparents' generation, they didn't know, okay, that the way they raised children and how fucking vicious and a lot of times exclusionary and isolationist they can choose to be was child abuse. But we know that the fuck now because we see the side effects that shit has on people. Come on, dude.
Of any kind at all, and I'll end on the boogeyman of rape statistics. Only 7% of rapists ever are convicted. It's interesting that rape, whenever governmental agencies talk about rape or rape victim advocacy groups talk about rape, you should just understand that you are being lied to. They are lying to you. There was a study done in the UK where uses the 7% number.
Yeah, and what does the UK's fucking statistics for law have shit to do with the United States statistics for law, okay? We have two completely different kinds of fucking governmental and judicial systems. They have a parliament, we have a democracy. There's a huge difference between how they do law and we do law. Okay, now they still have the same kinds of laws. They still have laws about, you know, don't kill people and shit. Don't fuck children. Okay, it would be stupid to have a civilized society without laws like that. But because you're trying to compare the UK to the United States, and say, well, you look, see, their statistical values are physically lower than ours, therefore they're better. That doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't.
Baroness Stearns to look into various issues involving rape, and by the Home Office, and in her report, she points out that this is a bit unusual. The people who are compiling these data and reporting this 7% number are using a procedure to arrive at that number that is used nowhere else in criminal statistics. It's used for no other crime anywhere.
Yeah, in the UK, so what does that have to do with how the fuck we do it in the United States?
Never has been used anywhere else. It is novel, it's sui generis, and it applies only for this one crime. How lucky is that? They happen to just happen upon the one way to do it that gives you the result you want and is valid only for that type of crime.
So what, does that trivialize rape then? Okay, does that, yes, you know, to you it does. Okay, well, you know, because this study found the way they do things in the UK is bullshit, therefore rape is trivial, and you should just kind of calm down and get the fuck over it. You are really an asshole. I mean, you are really an asshole.
Same, different system, but same kind of bullshit that's being done in the United States right now by the FBI, where they classify now attempted rape for statistical purposes as just being a rape statistic. Not committing rape is actually rape now. And instead of actually counting the number of rapes, which, like we do for other crimes, we actually count the number that happen that we know about.
Even though other parts of the Justice Department in this country are trying to fucking vet that shit because there are far too many fucking falsified rape accusations that go on, especially go all the way to prosecution and land people in prison for years for a crime they didn't fucking commit. Okay? They're actually trying to increase the penalty to deter the behavior. And what do I mean by that? Increase the penalty for filing a false rape accusation to deter other people from wanting the fuck to do it. Because if they see somebody who goes to prison for 30, 40 fucking years for trying to fuck up somebody's life over something they didn't do, I would say that would, if it gets into the news and becomes a big story, I would say that would deter a lot of goddamn people from wanting to fucking do it. Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing to you? You know, but you're just going to say, well, it's the FBI doing it, so, well, no, I'm not going to fucking talk about the Justice Department in and of itself wanting to do some research on how they're going to fucking correct this problem. I mean, you know, that wouldn't drive my narrative of saying it's okay to fuck 8-year-olds.
And we make
got to give them some wine first.
Inferences about it. They've decided to apply a different method where they project what it would be if they counted. But the one thing they won't do is actually go around counting, because that's like work.
And how do you know this for 100% fact? The majority of this video has been just you stating things and assuming you're right because you've said them. Okay, you've provided 3 sources here for your bullshit. One is from 2001, one refers one that was written in 1998 or 1997. And the other one is trying to compare, you're trying to use it to compare the way the UK does things to the way the United States does things. It doesn't fucking work that way. Okay? So yeah, the statistics are going to be lower because of how they vet things in another country's system. But, you know, when the fucking all the cards are down, it doesn't have jack shit to do with how we do things and how we bullshit our own people. Because you're talking about 2 completely different fucking systems. 2 completely different countries.
So all these objections aren't objections.
And that's about fucking rape. An absolutely violent violation of a woman. What the fuck does that have to do with age of consent? Okay, you've gotten so far off topic here, and you even brought in ISIS and shit. What does any of this have to do with age of consent?
To the extent that you think that the 7% or the rape statistics are objections, is to the extent that you're gullible. Whenever a governmental agency is talking to you about rape statistics, you can rest assured you are being misled. And back to the Baroness Stearns report. Indeed, in it, she says this number has been paraded around by the government and by this
of the United fucking Kingdom.
People, you know, by people everywhere, much to the ruination of the public discourse on this topic. It is terribly misleading. It uses a methodology that exists nowhere else.
So then what is your discussion here? Like, what are you trying to say? The fucking age, like, I don't get it. Like, what is your point? Age of consent and laws against rape are trivial? Is that your fucking point? I don't follow what you're saying at all. Okay, we have laws that keep adults from manipulating kids in place for good fucking reason, you idiot. You know? Okay, and whether or not the statistics are vetted by another country's government that has jack shit to do with our country's government and how we do things here, it doesn't change the fact that it's a good idea to have laws like that in place.
And to count this number, to count this crime to take account of this crime, I should say, in a way that won't work anywhere else, and it shouldn't work here. And indeed, if you use the normal statistical methods on rape in the UK, like you use for every other crime, because after all, rape is not some particular...
Again, what the fuck does the UK's law have to do with the United fucking States law? I mean, I don't know if you still go to school for whatever it was you're trying to do, like for your law degree, like criminal justice or criminal prosecution. But if you don't go to school anymore, or you just dropped out, I can totally see why you fucking would. Because, like, what does their fucking law have any precedent over ours? It doesn't have any fucking precedent over ours. Okay, it doesn't. They do law differently than the way they do, and their laws don't mean jack shit, and their statistics don't mean jack shit to ours. You're just saying, well, say, hey, this is the way things are done over the United Kingdom. Therefore, they represent what goes on here. Why? How? That doesn't make any sense. You know, that's like I said, comparing the fucking what ISIS does and saying that that's a commentary on how the rest of the world is becoming, even though like I said, haven't gone down to the gallows this weekend to see who's getting either drawn and quartered or burned alive or fucking guillotined and shit. Get with the fucking times. Get to the fucking 21st century, dude.
Particularly special crime. It's just a crime like any... Well, it's not exactly like any other, but the statistics are just...
Because it's not as bad. Rape isn't as bad as murder. That's what you're saying.
Numbers like any other thing. And when you do the same analysis for all the crimes using the same protocols, what you find out is that it's 58%, which is higher than quite a lot of other crimes, to include some violent crimes. Alright, I'll leave it there. You guys have a great night.
Leave it there at what? That isn't even a fucking point. You're just saying that, okay, well, because I said so, age of consent, you know, is stupid. You know, people have a natural right to want to have sex with 8-year-olds. Okay? And then you're going to say, oh, see, people that are saying that are stupid. No, they're not. Okay? They're saying exactly what the fuck they're recanting and reciting exactly what the fuck you said. Alright? They're repeating what your point is. Because it's so preposterously goddamn stupid, there's no other way to say it. And you can try to spin it and manipulate people's fucking opinions as much as you want to. It doesn't change the fact that what you're advocating for is repealing age of consent laws because you don't like them. Because you don't find them, you know, beneficial for whatever, you know, I could say projectionary fucked up reason that you do. Alright? You know, I don't want to sit here and try to understand why somebody would say that it's, you know, a natural right for somebody who's 30 years old to want to manipulate a teenager into being in a sexual relationship with them, you know, and use their sensibilities to their own advantage. I don't want to fucking imagine a system that thinks that's fucking right, jackass. And I don't know what ISIS had anything to fucking do with this topic. I don't know why you have to go up and say that people that are victims of childhood sexual abuse are just fucking being misled through things like therapy and psychiatry and psychology and shit when they go to try to get treatment for the side effects of what it was that was fucking done to them. And, you know, that they're all stupid for, you know, going to a therapist because they're just going to be lied to. Because you're one of these conspiracy theory fucking dumbass numbskulls who think it's a giant conspiracy to just lie to people and make them have problems they didn't have before. That if somebody is fucking violently raped over and over and over again as a child, you stupid fuck, or molested over and over and over as a child, they just grow up to be fine. No, they grow up to have a completely warped viewpoint of shit like this and trivialize it like you fucking do, jackass. I can see why people had such a fucking problem with these videos. This guy is a goddamn idiot. The Justicar. What the fuck does that even fucking mean? What is a fucking Justicar? You're a complete idiot. You're reciting, you know, studies that were done, you know, almost over a decade ago, as if they have any relevancy to what the psychological community feels on these issues now. Okay? You're reciting a fucking wiki page about a fucking article that was written in 1990 goddamn 7. Alright? And then you're sitting there trying to compare the way the United Kingdom's fucking system does to what the United States system does, as if that has any bearing on one another at all. It's two completely different systems of government that practice law in two completely different fucking ways. So therefore, their statistical values of these, you know, individual crimes, at that point, they don't have shit to do with one another. Because they're being prosecuted and being investigated and being handled in two completely different ways. You're a fucking idiot. 224 likes. At least I know there's at least 224 stupid fucking people in this world who couldn't have been bothered to listen to what this idiot was actually saying. They're just like, wow, he really sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Therefore, I gotta give it a thumbs up because I just don't want to think too hard on this topic. What a fucking idiot.